One of the things that Johnny mentioned was that oftentimes teachers will just hand them a paper and say, here's your paper, here's your do now question, you have 5 minutes, get to it, and the teachers don't show them what to do. And Johnny is an ELL, but he's in pre-AP, and sometimes we expect a little bit too much of our pre-AP kids, even though they are an ELL student. Sometimes we need to give them some different vocabulary and rephrase the question so they can understand it a little bit better than what we just hand all of the other children who have the background vocabulary.
Instead of having how do you learn, maybe give them some options with like listing 5 or 6 different activities or things you do in your classroom that they'd be familiar with, and have them like circle which ones they use, they like, or maybe rank them from 1 to 7.
Did he really know what was being asked?
Right.
And how do you avoid putting words into their mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because
especially when they don't speak.
Yeah. So in the case of your student, do you strategically pair her up with students who are bilingual?
Yes, and I would love to. I tried a couple times to deviate from that and try to put her with more where she was forced to use English, and the grades just plummeted.
Interesting.
And so I'm sure I have a lot to learn about how to teach ELLs.
Well, and part of sheltered instruction is getting students to use the academic vocabulary, to use the English language.
Sure.
So where is that balance?
Right.
You know. And how do you build esteem in a student who is so self-conscious? How do you make them feel more comfortable about sharing out in class, or even just asking for help from a teacher? You know, that's kind of a tough one.
Well, one of the things I try to think a lot about is, because I know in their ESL class they're working on like the 4 components of language, with speaking and listening and reading and writing, and so I really try to make sure that they get the opportunity to do all those things in the classroom. And usually, especially when it comes to speaking, if they're not, even though kids tend to first listen and speak better before they can read and write, I try to give them an opportunity to either read or write what they're going to say on their own or with a smaller group before you have them speak with the whole class, kind of a think, pair, share idea, because that can really help boost their language skills, and then get an opportunity to practice with a smaller group of students. Another thing I do is make sure, like, if I know I'm going to call on them to speak out in front of the whole class, I make sure that when they're talking in their group that I go and stand near their group or interact with their group, and tell them, like, good job, or that's exactly right. So when they do speak out to the class, they feel like, okay, Miss Tanner already told me that this answer is correct, and so I can be confident in my speaking. For me, I don't really specifically think about the specific ELPs. What I think more of is the 4 components of the language, and is that incorporated into the class, and what level are each of the students at, and if they're at a more beginner level, thinking about more basic instructions and more basic vocabulary list or materials that I can give them, versus an advanced high student who you would expect to be almost on par with your English speakers. So for me, it's just more of keeping those things in mind rather than the specific help.
And the way that I look at the ELPs is it's just more of a, I mean, it's almost like a list of best practices for anyone, much less a language learner. So, you know, but typically I will design the lesson and then look at the ELPs and pick which one will fit.
Then we got to a place where we were really working on bringing up our economically disadvantaged students, and so the ELLs are kind of our, you know, and the SPED students as well are kind of our last frontier. We're really a strong campus academically, as you know, compared to I think where we were 13 years ago. Really some strong teaching techniques and methods happening on our campus. Our CAC has identified the ELLs as a focus area for our campus, and so that's why I suggested that based on our campus needs, our ELLs are our next group that we need to work on and bring up to the next level.